New York, 6 a.m. A man sat silently on the top floor of a luxury glass tower, holding a glass of whiskey, still filled with ice, even though the sun had long risen. William Hunter, a name that once shook the global real estate market every time he stepped up to a podium. A man who never bowed to the press. The owner of more than 48 skyscrapers across the United States, with a face that could make any financial magazine cover feel incomplete without him. But now, in that cold penthouse, the powerful man was staring intently at an old photograph, a wedding photo. He and his ex-wife were smiling brightly beneath a rain of white petals. The wedding dress had been custom-made in Milan, worth more than a luxury apartment in Brooklyn. But that gaze was now just a memory reduced to ashes. "Why the hell were you smiling like that, William?" he murmured, as if questioning his reflection in the glass. "Because back then you didn't know. You were just a joke." No one knew, not even his closest associates at Hunter Global, that Chairman William Hunter had just gotten divorced following a truth so painful it was almost cruel. His wife was pregnant, but the child was not his. It all started with a routine health check. William had thought he'd just be testing cholesterol and liver enzymes, but it was the fertility test results that crushed him. Low sperm motility, nearly inactive. "We're afraid you cannot conceive naturally." At first he said nothing, but a few weeks later, his wife, a famous supermodel with millions of followers, announced she was pregnant. She smiled joyfully, hugged him tightly and said, "We will be a perfect family." Perfect William wasn't naive. He checked ovulation dates, their times of intimacy, and quietly ordered a DNA test behind her back. The results froze his blood colder than the ice in the glass he drank from every night. "I was wrong from the beginning. To believe that love could be bought with money." From that moment on, William Hunter fell into a bottomless abyss. He didn't scream. He didn't smash anything. He just changed. No more press conferences. No more cold smirks at shareholders. Just liquor, nameless women coming and going, and endless nights that never seemed to end. He once thought, "I'll get a woman pregnant, any woman, just to prove I'm not useless." But every time he woke up next to a stranger's body, he felt nothing but disgust. Money. He was still rich. Talent. He was still making millions. But inside, William Hunter had begun to rot. Someone once asked him, "If you have everything, what hurts you the most?" He answered without hesitation, "What hurts me is knowing that everything I have can't buy trust, and it sure as hell can't save my heart from numbness." That high floor where people assume life must be dazzling was where William heard the loudest hollowness inside him. And maybe, if not for that rainy night, if not for stopping at a tiny Harlem convenience store to buy cigarettes, and if not for a calm yet sincere gaze from a total stranger, William Hunter might have been buried forever in the darkness of his own making. But perhaps fate had something else in mind. A small light was headed his way, not sparkling like money, not dazzling like city lights, just a heart still intact, waiting to be heard. Harlem, 10 p.m. It was pouring rain. William Hunter was driving alone. The headlights cut through the gray curtain of water like blades, slicing into old memories. He didn't know why he had driven here, far from the wealthy neighborhoods where men in tailored suits never came. But maybe he just needed a place that didn't reflect his image. The car stopped in front of a small 24-hour supermarket, its yellowish lights flickering like the last breath of an old house. He stepped inside. No one recognized who he was, and somehow, that made him feel lighter. He randomly grabbed a pack of cigarettes, a small liquor bottle, and some mints. As he walked to the checkout counter, his eyes met hers. Aisha, a black woman in a simple employee uniform, her hair neatly braided, face bare of makeup. but her eyes, deep and still, like a lake after rain. She didn't smile. She didn't put on that mechanical cheerfulness. She looked at him as if she were assessing whether he was a decent man or just another lost soul passing through. "That'll be $18.45. Her voice was soft, not cold, not sweet, just real. William handed her his black card, his gaze tinged with curiosity and exhaustion. "You working this late?" Aisha nodded without looking at him for long. "Night shift. My shift." He was quiet for a few seconds, then suddenly asked, "You want to make some extra money?" She looked up. That look, as if she had heard that line 1,000 times from 1,000 kinds of men. William smirked sarcastically. "I meant, have dinner with me, or a drink, my treat." Aisha didn't blush, didn't react dramatically. She was silent for a few beats, then gently laid the receipt on the counter. "You think your money can buy everything, don't you?" William shrugged. "It's gotten me quite a lot so far." Aisha tilted her head slightly, speaking slowly as if dissecting a wound. "Your problem isn't loneliness. You don't need sex. You don't need someone to fill a void. You need someone who sees your wounds and doesn't look away." The room fell silent. Outside, the rain continued to pour, but in that moment, William felt his invisible armor had been stripped away. No one had ever said that to him. Not doctors, not therapists, not even lovers, no matter if they were A-list actresses or Miss Universe contenders. He looked at Aisha as if she had seen straight through flesh and bone, down to the place he'd hidden for so long, the place marked by sarcasm, one-night stands, and the hollow laughter of an ex-wife who'd left a scar instead of a memory. "What's your name?" "Doesn't matter. It does to me. Remember me, as the woman who said no to you." Then she turned away and rang up the next customer. William stepped out of the store. Rain was still falling. In his hand was a plastic bag worth nothing compared to the empire he owned. But there was one thing he couldn't take with him: the look in Aisha's eyes. That night, for the first time in a long time, William didn't drink. He lay in a $100,000 bed, restless, thinking about a girl with no makeup, no designer gown, no bending to his fame. And he realized it was that refusal that made him feel truly seen by someone for the first time. The next morning, on his desk were authorization documents for acquiring a small supermarket chain in Harlem. His assistant was surprised to see the instruction: put the entire system under the charitable fund, and find the employee list for the night shift at branch number 17. To others, she was just a cashier. But she was a mirror to William, showing him that even when you've lost everything, you can still hold on to dignity. And so, the game began. No longer a game for pleasure, no longer about power or sex, but a strange pursuit by a man whose heart had seemingly died, and a woman who would never bow to money. New York, 4 a.m. William Hunter opened his eyes in the dead of night. The bedroom was still like a dream that had died in silence, except for the faint clinking of ice melting in a glass of whiskey on his nightstand, a drink he never touched. Strange, just like last night, and the night before that. He couldn't sleep, but he couldn't get drunk either. No more late-night calls summoning beautiful women. No more texts that said, "You free tonight?" Gone was the easy indulgence he used to drown the growing void in his soul. All that remained was an unnamed entry in an employee roster. A woman who left behind nothing but a glance, and one sentence that kept echoing in his mind: "You don't need sex. You need someone who sees your wounds." Who is she? William stood by the window, staring at the still sleeping city, muttering. It wasn't about her looks, not her voice, not even the rejection. It was because she had done what no one else dared to do. She looked directly at who he was, raw, exhausted, and needing forgiveness. It had been 10 years since someone last spoke to him without pretense, without fear, without translating every word into a transactional value. 9 a.m. Hunter, Global Headquarters. An assistant knocked and entered with a report, but William didn't bother to look. He was rewatching surveillance footage from the supermarket, a privilege few knew he had, having signed the acquisition order for the chain just one day after that fateful rainy night. He paused the footage on a frame of Aisha arranging products on the shelf, a simple, ordinary movement. But to him now it was living proof of something he had lost peace through honest work and dignity in every small action. I have to see her again. That evening, Harlem Branch, number 17, William showed up for the second time. No sports car, no bodyguards, no tie or blazer. He wore a gray hoodie cap pulled low and waited in line like any regular customer. But as he reached the counter, his heart sank slightly. Aisha wasn't there. He asked another employee, pretending to be a regular. The answer caught him off guard. Aisha took a few days off to care for her sick grandma. She worked triple shifts before that, so I guess she's tired. Aisha was like no one else. In a world where people wore masks to survive, she lived honestly. And it was that honesty that left William completely unmoored. The next day, William returned. No sign of her. The day after that, still nothing. By the fourth day, a long-buried emotion surfaced: worry. He asked his assistant to check discreetly and confidentially. He didn't want her to feel tracked or think he was abusing his power. That woman deserved to be approached with kindness, not money. Fifth day, 10 p.m., she appeared. Aisha walked into the supermarket in a thin jacket, looking a bit pale, but still managing a soft smile for her coworker. William stood at the counter's far end, holding a bottle of water and a bar of mint chocolate. His heart beat faster, an unfamiliar sensation for a man who had been on hundreds of dates. She saw him, stopped, but didn't look surprised. Just a slight nod, not cheerful, not flustered, calm, as if she had already known he would come back. Still into mint, huh? A weightless question. William nodded with a faint smile. I came to apologize. For the last time. For hitting on me. For thinking I could put a price on a person. At least you know. And to say thank you. For turning you down. For not seeing me as a breathing ATM. Aisha was silent for a moment. Then gently, if you want someone to see your wounds, then you should also learn to see the wounds of others. William didn't know what to say. He felt strangely small. Not humiliated, just illuminated. For the first time, he hadn't come to control someone, but to listen. That night, William didn't go back to his mansion. He sat in his car parked outside the supermarket late into the night, thinking about his life. And about her last words, have you ever really looked at someone without trying to fix them? That night, William Hunter began to rewrite his life story through someone else's eyes. A few days later, Aisha continued her usual routine at the small supermarket in Harlem. She scanned each item individually, handed out receipts with both hands, and smiled gently at the older women buying bread every evening. And when she saw William Hunter standing in line, she said nothing. She didn't avoid him. She didn't approach him. She let him stand there, and William did stand there every day. Not because he had no work. The company kept flooding him with urgent emails, crisis reports from the Las Vegas project, a pending merger deal awaiting approval. But somehow the things that once made his mornings rush with adrenaline now felt like meaningless strings of words. He came to the store every night, buying absurd random things: bottled water, mint candies, single rolls of toilet paper. He didn't talk much, didn't try to pry. He just stood, watched, waited. Then one day he stopped coming. 3 nights passed, no William. Aisha started to notice, even if just a flicker. Not because she missed him, but because part of her was curious. Why would someone like him, powerful, proud, composed, keep showing up here like he was on some pilgrimage, searching for something he had lost? The fourth night. The supermarket doors opened at 10:15 p.m. Not William, but a delivery boy. He brought a brown paper package labeled, "To Aisha. Open after your shift." She looked around hesitant. Then she cautiously opened it after her night shift. Inside was a folded note and a pair of gardening gloves. The note read, "I lied. I don't like mint, but I like the way you speak the truth. I just bought an old abandoned house. The garden out back is like me forgotten. I need a gardener, not to clean it up, but to show me how to grow something again. William H." Aisha smiled, not mockingly, not sentimentally, just puzzled. The next day in the supermarket's inbox, she received an email invitation to become the communications assistant for a nonprofit called the Garden Project, funded by the Hunter Global Foundation. Salary twice her current pay. Schedule: flexible, self-managed. Scale: small enough to feel sincere, not large enough to make her feel bought. Aisha stood for a long time in front of that email. She didn't want to become part of some man's approach strategy. But deep down, she also knew there was something different about William. Not like the rich men who had passed through her life before. 1 week later, she said yes, and William couldn't hide his smile. Not a victory grin, but the smile of someone who just saw a small door open, leading into a garden he once believed no one would ever be allowed to enter. The Garden Project office was just an old studio space, repurposed into a working hub. No luxury leather chairs. No flashy signage. Just sunlight pouring through frosted windows, and the potted plants Aisha had brought from home. On her first day, William came by. Not as a CEO. No tie. He wiped down windows himself, arranged chairs with her, and even brought morning coffee for the entire 3-person team. Aisha looked at him skeptical. "Are you playing the role of the nice guy now? I'm trying to learn to be a normal person. Because of me. Because I realized I lost that part of myself a long time ago." And from then on, they worked together every day. No talks of the past. No talk of money. No touching. Just brainstorming ideas for the community garden restoration project. Surveying abandoned lots. Sharing quiet laughter when an 80-year-old man volunteered to plant vegetables for the neighborhood kids. Aisha didn't open up easily. William didn't push. But the strange thing was, he started to feel lighter with each passing day. Never in his life had William found joy in a newly sprouted plant, or felt genuine gratitude from a homeless man for clearing the trash behind his shelter. And at the heart of all of this was Aisha. Not for her beauty, not out of conquest, but because she was the only one who didn't see him as a billionaire, didn't pity him, didn't try to use him. She saw him as a human being. And to William, that was worth more than any deal he had ever signed. "I don't want to be your humanitarian project," Aisha said it one autumn afternoon, just as the sun touched the tops of Brooklyn's old rooftops, where they were surveying land for a new community garden. William stood still. In his hands was a sleek design for a hydroponic garden drafted by a renowned architect he'd hired privately without Aisha's input. He only wanted to help. But the look in her eyes was distant. "Humanitarian project." He repeated the words, voice low, almost a whisper. "I thought I was doing something good." Aisha said nothing. She wasn't angry, but William knew that silence was more terrifying than a scolding, because he didn't understand. What made Aisha agree to work with him wasn't a beautiful vision. It wasn't the generous salary. It wasn't pity. It was when he stood beside her, bent down to pick up fallen seeds, cleaned every smudged window, and listened to the nameless stories of the neighborhood's people. But the closer they grew, the more William began to revert to his old self. Not deliberately, just instinct. He was used to spending money to solve problems, used to making quick decisions, used to control. And that became the first barrier. Aisha lived in a world that moved slowly. She believed in doing things by hand, with time and with heart. Whenever William proposed new tech, a faster solution, or a funding package from the Hunter Foundation, she hesitated. "You don't understand," she said. "People here have lived their whole lives being told they need saving. What they need isn't a handout. It's someone who believes they deserve a voice." William felt a heaviness in his chest, not from being rejected, but because for the first time he realized he didn't know what it meant to live like a normal person. That afternoon, they stopped talking. The walk back to the subway felt endless, lined with trees just beginning to lose their leaves. Aisha didn't turn back. William didn't follow. Two worlds once, seeming to meet now quietly veering apart. The next day, William didn't show up at the project office. Aisha didn't text. Both retreated into silence, yet couldn't stop thinking about each other. William sat in his private library, thousands of books he had never read beyond page 2. For the first time, he pulled out a thin one, Demographics and Sustainable Poverty. On the first page, a handwritten quote made his heart clench. "Only by understanding others can we begin to know ourselves." Aisha, meanwhile, sat beside her grandmother in the hospital room. Her grandmother had just woken up after a fever. She smiled, brushing her granddaughter's hair. "You're falling for someone, aren't you?" "I don't know. Maybe. But I don't want to love someone who can't walk with me to the end." Her grandmother chuckled softly. "Then don't be afraid. If he's brave enough to slow down for you, maybe he's worth loving." 3 days later, William returned to the project, unannounced. He brought a new proposal, handwritten, messy. But every word is sincere. "I want to start over. From scratch. No investors. No branding. No media." Aisha looked up surprised. He handed her the plan. To build the garden with the help of the local community. Everyone would contribute plants, soil time. No one would be paid, but everyone would be called a co-founder. "I don't want to be in charge. I want to be part of it." "Why?" "Because I'm tired of doing things for people. I want to learn how to do things with them." Aisha smiled. A genuine smile. No skepticism, no walls. Just a new seed of trust beginning to sprout. That a man who had once lost everything could relearn how to be human. And as she walked away, not looking back, William called after her. "I do like mint. And coffee too. And what? And I like the way you say no. It makes me want to learn how to hear yes." For the first time, the distance between two worlds began to close, not through wealth, but through time and patience. November. The first winter winds swept through New York. The first community garden in the William and Aisha co-led project was nearly finished. A once trash-filled lot was now blanketed in green, fresh herbs, wildflowers, and the laughter of children running between the garden beds. William sat on a wooden bench, hands caked with dirt, shirt damp with sweat. Aisha had just harvested a bunch of tender mustard greens, tilting her head playfully as she looked at him. "Hard to believe a billionaire knows how to dig." William chuckled, light and easy. "I used to think I could only build with glass and concrete. Now I've learned something new. Soil may be soft, but it holds roots longer." Everything was going well. But some wounds don't live on the skin, and some memories never die no matter how deeply buried. And William, though learning to love, still couldn't forgive himself. One early winter morning, William received a letter. No return address. The envelope was old, the handwriting trembling. "I'm leaving soon, but perhaps you still need to know the truth. LM." He opened it. Inside was an old photograph. A woman lying in a hospital bed holding the tiny hand of a little boy. That boy was William, age 7, and the woman his mother. William froze. Not from memory, but because he had always believed his mother abandoned him as a child. His father, a cold real estate magnate, had always said she chose to leave. She couldn't handle this life. She was weak. From then on, William learned to live without love. He never hoped. He never cried. But now in his hands was a different truth. His mother had battled terminal cancer. She had begged his father to let her see William one last time and was denied. He feared I'd interfere with William's ambition, she wrote. But I always believed my son could grow into someone capable of love, if someone was patient enough to touch the frozen heart. William sat motionless for a long time. The mansion was eerily still. No voices, no lights, only himself, confronting the very thing he had avoided all his life. The truth was that he had been deceived by the person who was supposed to protect him. That evening, Aisha didn't see William in the garden. No message, no call. She felt something was wrong but didn't press. She'd learned to respect a person's space. Still, she worried. The next night, William showed up, late, tired, but not drunk. He sat on the wooden bench silent for a long time, then finally spoke. I used to think my mother left me. Turns out, she was the one left behind. I hate myself for believing it for so long. And now, I don't know what to do with all these feelings. Aisha placed a hand gently on his shoulder. No cheap comfort, just a quiet presence. My father left too, she said. But my mother always taught me, some people don't hurt us out of cruelty. They just don't know how to love. William turned to her, eyes like ashes. If I don't know how to love, do I still deserve to be loved? Aisha met his gaze. Steady, unflinching. Love doesn't seek the deserving. It seeks the honest. In that moment, something cracked open inside William. Not collapse, but surrender. To the pain he had long buried beneath power, money, and women. He rested his head on her shoulder. For the first time in his life, he didn't need to prove anything. He just needed to be near someone who listened. The next morning, William came to the garden earlier than usual. He brought a wooden box. Inside was a small sapling and a handwritten note. This is an eucalyptus tree. My mother used to love them. I don't have her anymore. But maybe, if it grows here, I'll feel like she's still watching. Aisha said nothing. She took the box and helped him dig a small hole in the corner of the garden. The wind blew cold, but in their hearts, it had never felt warmer. From that day on, Aisha began looking at William differently, no longer with hesitation, no longer in doubt, but with empathy. And something beginning to bloom quietly, trust. New York, late November. Snow had started to fall. The small eucalyptus tree William and Aisha had planted at the community garden now stood rooted silent in the cold wind. Its young leaves trembled, but held firm, much like the bond between them, undefined yet alive. That evening, a light layer of snow covered the entire garden. The yellow glow from the wooden office shed cast a hazy warmth into the night. With his hand pressed against the frost-covered window, William stood watching Aisha fold Christmas cards for the neighbors. He had been standing there for nearly 5 minutes, not out of hesitation, but out of fear. Fear of disturbing something so delicate. Aisha looked up and caught his gaze through the glass. No surprise, no shyness, just a soft smile gentler than the candle burning beside her. Why are you standing outside? It's freezing. William stepped in. The cold followed him into the tiny wooden room, but his eyes carried an unexpected warmth. They sat side by side, hands inches apart. On the table were 2 mugs of hot cocoa. The scent of cinnamon, ginger, and vanilla filled the air. Snow fell outside the window like a cinematic backdrop, but no director could have staged the quiet intimacy that surrounded them. William looked at Aisha for a long time. You always make me feel small. Because I'm shorter than you, she teased. No, because I lived so long without knowing what it felt like to be seen. And now I see myself when I'm near you. There was no love confession, no swelling music. Just 2 pairs of eyes meeting, and time. Standing still. Then Aisha turned her face away, rested her head slightly against the window frame, her gaze lost in the distance. I once loved someone. He was a good man, but he always believed I needed to become a better version of myself to be worthy of him. So I tried, spoke more elegantly, dressed more fashionably, and laughed the right way. Until one day I realized I'd disappeared in that love. She paused, then continued. I promised myself, if I ever loved again, I would only love someone who made me want to be me. Not some polished idea of perfection. William gently reached for her hand. He was cold. Hers was warm. And she didn't pull away. I don't know if I'm capable of love, he said honestly. I'm not romantic. I don't write poetry. I have no sweet memories of family. But I know that when you smile, I feel peace. And when you cry, I want to carry it for you. If that's not love, I hope I never learn its proper definition. Aisha chuckled, a soft, real laugh. You always say simple things in the most complicated way. William let out a quiet sigh. Was that your graceful way of rejecting me? No. Then I'm letting you stay. A little longer. They sat there saying nothing more. Outside, the snow blanketed everything in white. Inside, two hearts once fractured. They were now finding warmth in one another. No force, no pressure, just presence. That night, William didn't return to his mansion. He stayed in that little wooden room on a makeshift bed crafted from an old armchair. Aisha left him a blanket and a handwritten note next to his cooled cup of cocoa. Sleep well, eucalyptus planter. Tomorrow the sun will shine. He read it again and again, like a man clutching his first love letter. After years of drifting through life as a hollow shell. The next morning, when Aisha returned, William was still asleep. She looked at him. His face was like that of a boy, unguarded, maskless. And in that quiet moment, she knew, if she wasn't afraid, this might be the first time she truly wanted to stay. 3 days after the turning season night, everything seemed normal, but normal no longer felt the same. William still came to the garden on time, still rolled up his sleeves, still called each elderly volunteer by name, with a gentleness he had never shown anyone before. Aisha still smiled, still quietly adjusted the notes on the bulletin board, still reminded him to drink water and get enough sleep. But between them was a silence neither could name. They never spoke about that night. No mention of the hand-holding. She was resting on her shoulder, the cold cocoa beside a handwritten note, not because they'd forgotten, but because they were both afraid. Afraid that saying it out loud might shatter something fragile or worse, make it real. Then the shift began. Subtle, small, but undeniable. Aisha got a phone call while watering the plants. Her voice faltered. Her gaze drifted. William walked over and asked. She replied, just a personal matter. Nothing serious. But after that day, she started coming in late. Occasionally, I took a day off. She gave no explanations, didn't avoid him. But it was enough. Enough for William to notice that something had changed. One morning, William arrived earlier than usual. Aisha wasn't there. He saw her notebook left on the table. He hesitated, then opened it, not to invade her privacy, but to check for notes for the volunteers. The first page listed the next round of plants to sow. The next was a medical appointment, a women's hospital, OB/GYN department, date the day before. His heart stopped. A wave of heat hit his forehead, like someone had just flicked on a light in a locked room of memories. Infertile. The only woman he had been intimate with in years was her. And now, she accidentally left behind a prenatal appointment in a notebook. William closed the notebook. Carefully. He didn't ask, didn't react. But that night, he didn't sleep. Not out of jealousy, not out of suspicion, but because he didn't dare to hope. The next morning, he sat in the garden, gloved hands resting idly. He wasn't planting, just staring at the eucalyptus tree. The early winter breeze had already taken some of its first leaves. Aisha arrived. She brought pastries for the volunteers, smiled as usual. But her gaze paused when she saw him sitting there quieter than normal. Are you okay? Still breathing. That's not the same as okay. He meant to say something, but instead he sighed. Inside, a battle raged. Should he speak or stay silent? Offer congratulations or ask directly? Step back or lean in? In the end, all he said was, "This week, will you be around much?" Aisha hesitated, then answered, "I've got a few personal things to take care of, but I'll try to keep showing up here consistently." William nodded slightly, pressed his lips as if holding something back, but said nothing more. He didn't know what right he had to ask. No title, no promises, just two people who once shared a night of silence. That evening, back at the mansion, William sat in front of his computer, typed the name of the hospital into the search bar, then deleted it. He walked to the bedroom, but couldn't lie down. He looked at an old photo of his mother. Beside it, a pressed eucalyptus leaf from the first sapling he ever planted. And he suddenly realized he had never known he wanted a child until the moment he thought he might have one. Not to prove he wasn't infertile, not to win the kind woman, but because. For the first time, the thought of a small soul calling him Dad terrified him, and awakened a longing so deep it hurt. The next morning, Aisha took the day off. When the team asked why, she said, "I just need some time to myself." William didn't press, but as she turned away, he said softly, "If there's something you want to say but don't know where to start, I'll wait." Aisha paused, turned. Her eyes glistened. "Thank you for not asking." Then she left, and William understood. Sometimes waiting is the only way to love. That night he returned to the garden alone. He sat by the eucalyptus tree and opened his pocket notebook. He scribbled a few lines. "If you're confused, I am too. If you're afraid of what's coming, I fear even more what I might never know. But if you let me walk beside you even without clarity, without certainty, I promise I won't walk away halfway." He didn't know if Aisha would ever read those words, but he knew he was rewriting his definition of love. Not possession, not conquest, but the willingness to stay, even without being called by name. A week passed. No calls, no messages, not a single glimpse of her. William had never known time to move so slowly. Each morning he still went to the garden, still watered the plants, still spoke with the neighbors. But his heart felt lost, like a lone voice singing in a cathedral after the congregation had left. Only echoes remained. He didn't ask anyone about Aisha, and no one dared mention her. Saturday morning. Gray skies. Snow is falling softly. William opened his front door, ready to head to the garden office, and saw an envelope placed neatly on his doorstep. No name, no postage stamp, just one handwritten line. "I need you to read this now, that I can't hold it in anymore." His hands trembled. He opened the envelope. Inside was a sonogram, a grainy black and white image, a tiny circular shape resting in a pale gray void. At the bottom, a line of text that stole his breath. 6 weeks. Gestational sac confirmed. Fetal heartbeat present. Father undetermined. William sank onto the steps. No wind blew, but he felt frozen to the core. He kept staring at the ultrasound photo, a simple piece of paper that weighed more than any skyscraper he had ever built. This could be his child. It might not be. It was something he once believed could never happen. Something he once swore he didn't need. But now, with the possibility right in front of him, all he could feel was one thing: the fear of losing something he never even had. That afternoon, William went to the hospital listed on the form. No appointment, no message to Aisha. He just stood silently outside the OB/GYN clinic, clutching the sonogram like a fragile talisman. About 30 minutes later, Aisha appeared. She wasn't surprised. She didn't avoid him. She looked at him as if she had known this moment was inevitable. "You came looking for me, no. You found me first." He held up the sonogram. Aisha nodded. "I was going to stay silent, but I couldn't. I don't want to begin something built on silence, even if that silence is gentle. They sat on a stone bench facing the hospital courtyard. Neither spoke for several minutes. Only the faint sound of winter wind and nurses' footsteps filled the space. Then William asked, "Is it?" My child Aisha didn't respond immediately. She looked down at her hands as if holding something delicate, something that could shatter with a single misplaced word. "I'm not sure," she said slowly. "All I know is, of everyone I've been close to, only one man made me feel safe. And I haven't been with anyone else in the past 6 months." William looked up, met her eyes. "I was diagnosed infertile." "I know." "Then why didn't you doubt it?" "Because you're the only man who made me feel chosen, not pitied. And maybe God doesn't always obey medical reports." William let out a small laugh, not of relief, but of someone trembling beneath the fragile weight of hope. "I'm scared," he confessed. "I used to think having a child would prove I'm still a man. But now, when this might be real, I'm scared. Scared of messing it up. Scared I'm not good enough. Scared I'll become a father like mine, the man who taught me that love is weakness." Aisha gently pressed her hand over his. "We're all scared, but if we keep running from what makes us tremble, how will we ever know if we're standing in front of the most precious thing life could give us?" William lifted his gaze. The wind brushed a strand of Aisha's hair across her cheek, and he realized no skyscraper was tall enough to shield him from the truth. No fortune large enough to buy back time. And if this was his child, he could either repeat the cycle or become the father a child truly deserved. "I want to do a test," William said. "Not out of doubt, but to be certain, to be ready." "I understand," Aisha nodded. "But whatever the result, I'm keeping the baby, and I won't expect anything from you." "I know," William said, "but I'll stay anyway, not out of obligation, but because I don't want you to go through this alone anymore." They sat in silence again. No hugs, no promises, only presence and a quiet decision not to run. As they stood to leave, Aisha turned back and asked softly, "If the baby is yours, will you tell them about your past?" William answered, eyes fixed on the bare trees beyond the hospital gate, numb. "But I'll let them grow up beside a man who's learning not to live inside his past anymore." 3 days after the hospital meeting, William walked into the Hunter Global boardroom. The room was unchanged, long cold, gleaming with glass and polished wood. But he was no longer the man who once sat at the head of the table, cold-eyed voice, deep with authority. No designer suit, no tie, just William, a man learning how to live truthfully. "I'm stepping down from day-to-day operations." Gasps rippled across the room. One board member stood abruptly. "You can't be serious. We're preparing for the biggest IPO in Singapore I know, and I've appointed an interim replacement." Murmurs erupted like a hive disturbed. Some worried, some inwardly celebrated, but no one understood why. William gathered his papers and left. No explanation, no request. He walked out as a man, with something more important than money. That afternoon, he returned to the garden. Aisha was watering mustard greens, her coat stretching over a now visible baby bump. "You didn't have to do that," she said upon hearing of his resignation. "I know," William replied with a quiet smile. "But I wanted to. I built an empire to prove I needed no one. Now, I want to build something that lets me keep just one person." Aisha stayed silent. In her eyes was something caught between being moved and being afraid. "I'm not worried for you," she whispered. "I'm scared for us. You think the media will leave us alone? You think the name William Hunter and a former cashier can exist quietly together?" William looked at her. His gaze was calmer and steadier than she'd ever seen. "They can write whatever they want. But our child won't be reading headlines. They'll look at how I treat their mother. And that's how they'll know who I am." A few days later, the first article broke. Front page of New York's most powerful financial newspaper. Billionaire William Hunter steps down. For a former supermarket cashier. A candid shot of William and Aisha in the community garden accompanied the piece. It wasn't vulgar, but the language laced with classist and racial undertones cut just as profoundly. The reactions spread like wildfire. Calls from journalists, cruel comments, stares in the supermarket aisles. Social media began to dig up Aisha's past, fabricating stories spun for entertainment. Then came the final visit. William's mother, a woman who had lived in Europe for years, always wary of anything different, flew in from Paris. She confronted him in his mansion. Her face was steel cold. "William, are you going to ruin this family's name for a woman who doesn't belong in our world?" William didn't answer immediately. He poured her a cup of tea, calm, gentle, but resolute. "Did you ever love my father?" "That's not the point. I'm asking because I need to know. Have you ever loved someone so much you were willing to lose everything?" She stared at him. Her expression cracked just slightly. "No, because I was smart enough never to place my heart on the chessboard." William smiled faintly. "Then I'm sorry, because I'm not that smart. But I want my child to grow up knowing their father chose love, not fear." She stood silent, left without another word. But William knew. He had just severed the final thread of soft power control she'd held over him for years. That night, Aisha came to his home. Not to argue, but to say goodbye. "I don't want to drag you down with me. I don't feel dragged down. Which is exactly why I'm afraid." William stepped forward, placed his hand gently over her belly, where a life was growing. "This child won't grow up surrounded by your fear. You don't have to carry it all alone anymore." Aisha broke down, not out of weakness, but because for the first time someone wasn't trying to rescue her, but choosing to stand beside her. 3 days later, William held a press conference, not to defend, not to apologize, but to declare, "I lived for image, but an image cannot love me. It cannot hold me when I am exhausted. It cannot forgive me when I fall. The only person who's ever done that, it is not on this board. She's planting mustard greens in a garden I once called it a pilot project. Now, she is the reason I'm learning how to be human again." The room went silent. Then the camera shutters snapped. Headlines began typing themselves. And William knew. He had lost a piece of his old world, but he had kept the one thing the new world could never buy. Private clinic. A snow-covered winter day. William sat alone in a cream-colored waiting room, as silent as the sealed envelope resting in his hands. The doctor had already called his name, already handed him the results, and left him to decide when he dared to open them. He had been holding that envelope for 2 hours. No movement. Just his gaze occasionally drifting toward the window, where snow fell steadily, like the rhythm of his heartbeat, cold, constant, and uncertain of its ending. And if this isn't my child, William couldn't finish the thought, not because he feared the truth, but because he feared he might react like the man he used to be, a man who chose withdrawal, control, emotional ice over vulnerability. But now there was no going back, no pretending, no beginning this journey with a lie. He opened the envelope. His eyes skimmed the first few lines. Then it stopped at the conclusion. Just one line. Paternal relationship confirmed. Probability 99.8%. William closed his eyes, not in shock, but because, for the first time in his life, he'd been given a chance he never thought possible. The opportunity to be a father. Not by design, not through legal negotiation, but through something no one could force into existence, life. That night, William didn't return to the mansion. He went to the garden. The snow had covered nearly every path. The small eucalyptus tree stood alone, but proud like a child in a harsh world, asking for no sympathy. Aisha sat inside the wooden shed near the fireplace, knitting a soft brown scarf for the baby. She looked up as he walked in. "You got the results, sis?" And William didn't answer right away. He stepped closer, placed the envelope gently on the old wooden table, then sat beside her closer than ever, as if an inch of distance might cause him to shatter. Do you remember the first thing you ever said to me? You don't need sex. You need someone who sees your wounds. Aisha nodded softly. Shit, then let me say something like that to you now. You don't need to be strong all the time. You don't have to carry everything alone. You need to know you're not alone. You have me, and our child has a father. Aisha turned away, tears silently falling. I'm scared, William. I'm scared everything will fall apart. I'm scared I'm not enough. I'm scared the child will grow up labeled a mistake. William took her hand and gripped it tightly. Bitte, if our child ever asks, Daddy, why was I born? I'll answer, because on a snowy night, your mother sat quietly, but her eyes were warm. And that night my heart beat again after years of silence. Because your mother never tried to change me. She let me want to change. For her. A moment passed. William stood and walked to the fogged-up window. He traced words with his finger. 99.8%. The other 0.2%. That's the miracle. The rest is faith. Aisha looked at those words and smiled. A real smile. Like sunlight breaking through fog. Like a seed pushing through frozen soil. Then, I'll let you walk with me, she whispered. I won't promise it won't hurt, but I promise I won't let go. They sat together by the fire. No music, no fireworks, no grand vows. Just a silence that meant something. And within that silence, a child was growing, in the mother's belly, and in the heart of a man who never thought he could love this deeply. New York, late winter. The snow had stopped falling, but the air was still cold. In room 217 of Brooklyn Central Hospital, the soft light of dawn filtered through a frosted window. Inside, no alarms. Just the hush of shallow breathing, the rustle of fabric, and a sound like the first note of an unwritten symphony. A baby's cry. A girl. 3.1 kilograms. Healthy. The embodiment of something once thought impossible. Trust reborn after trauma. Aisha lay on her side, forehead still damp with sweat. Her eyes were tired but peaceful. She had just endured over 10 hours of labor. No complaints, no hesitation, because the life inside her wasn't just born from her body, but from a journey of forgiveness, love, and courage. She turned her head gently and saw William standing there frozen like a statue. But his eyes read not from sadness, but it's the kind of emotion that steals your breath. He couldn't believe he was here. Couldn't believe he had just witnessed a child take her first breath. His child. Not through a screen, not through paperwork or an adoption decree, but real. Flesh. Breath. A heartbeat made from him, from her, and from everything they had overcome. Do you want to hold her? Aisha whispered, her voice soft as wind. William didn't answer. He stepped forward and with trembling hands, gently took the baby from the nurse. And then something miraculous happened. The baby stopped crying the moment she touched his chest. Her tiny eyes opened just barely. And for the first time in his life, William Hunter was seen. With no judgment, no expectations, no wounds. Just presence. As if the world had quietly reset itself. Hello there, he whispered, voice breaking. I'm a man who didn't believe he deserved love, but you came as if to prove that everyone does. Aisha watched him. She said nothing, but in her eyes was everything: forgiveness, gratitude, and quiet relief. There were no flowers that day, no guests, no balloons or cake, just the three of them. A woman reborn as a mother, a man redeemed as a father, and a tiny soul unaware that she had already changed them both forever. That night, William returned to the community garden. Alone. He stood beneath the eucalyptus tree they had once planted. The snow had melted. The ground was softer now. He brought with him a small wooden sign, hand-carved. Etched into the wood This is where love began. And from that love, a father was born. He staked it into the earth, not for show, but as a quiet marker of fate. As he turned to leave, a lantern flickered on in the distance. It was Aisha, holding the baby. Her face glowed in the soft yellow light, tired, but no longer alone. She spoke just one sentence. "She doesn't have a name yet. Have you thought of one?" William nodded. "Would you like to say it first?" Aisha stepped closer, baby in arms. William leaned in and whispered, "Her name is Hope, because she came when we thought we had none left. And because she reminds us, some miracles only happen when the heart stays open." Aisha laughed, tears rolling down her cheeks. And so Hope, a girl named for life, for light, for beginnings, was held close beneath the warm glow of lanterns in the garden that had once symbolized rebirth. Early spring morning. The sky was clear. The sunlight is gentle. Golden mustard flowers bloomed all around the community garden. There was no loud music, no extravagant film crew, no sparkling ball gown, just a wooden trellis wrapped in vines and simple white daisies. Wooden chairs were arranged in 2 quiet rows, and a chalkboard sign placed at the garden gate, written by hand, wedding of 2 who replanted trust. William walked in from the back of the garden, dressed in a modest gray suit. His face is no longer the cold mask the press once knew. He greeted every elderly neighbor, every child from the block. The same people who once viewed him with suspicion, now smiling with quiet trust. Then Aisha stepped out. No princess gown. She wore an ivory dress, simple flowing. Her hair was loose, and in her arms baby Hope, peacefully asleep. No heavy makeup because of her smile and her eyes. They were already more radiant than the spring sun. When their eyes met at the center of the petal-lined path, no one clapped, no one cheered. There was only silence, a sacred kind of silence known only to those who have walked out of one life and into something new. The officiant was the eldest woman in the neighborhood, the same one who once told Aisha, "If he's brave enough to slow down, maybe he's worth loving." Now she smiled warmly and blessed them in simple words. "No one marries because they're ready. We marry because we choose not to leave, no matter what comes." William held Aisha's hand. His eyes didn't promise forever. They promised a return. "I used to be afraid of love," he said. "But you taught me. It isn't about satisfaction. It's about staying through what must be endured. I won't promise perfection, but I will ask you every day, do you feel loved?" Aisha replied softly but firmly. "I once lived in a world where I wasn't chosen. But since meeting you, I've chosen myself again, and I've chosen you. I don't need you to rescue me. I need you to stay not as a hero, but as my husband, the father of our child and my partner through the road ahead." The older woman nodded. "That's enough." They kissed. Their first as husband and wife, not grand, not choreographed, but gentle like sunlight through the new buds of the eucalyptus tree. Baby Hope stirred. Her eyes opened slightly, her lips curled into an unconscious smile. The garden smiled with her. Aisha whispered, "She's smiling, just like you did, the day you found out she was yours." William held her hand tighter and whispered, "That was the day her father was born again." After the ceremony, there was no limousine, just a warm apple pie baked by neighbors. No champagne, only cool mint lemonade. No fireworks. But dozens of paper lanterns were strung across the garden. By evening, candles glowed beside every plant. William stood behind Aisha, arms around her. In her hand was a card that read, "The Hunter Thompson Family. First spring." No one said they lived happily ever after, but everyone knew they would choose each other again and again, every day, in the sun, in the rain, through every storm. because they had a garden where light had once been planted from the broken pieces of two hearts. You've made it to the end of this story, which is the beginning of something even more beautiful. Leave a blessing for William, Aisha, and baby Hope in the comments. If you believe that no one is truly emotionally barren, but needs the right kind of love to grow, give this series a like. And if you'd love to hear the epilogue. When 5-year-old Hope asks her father about the mysterious lantern in the garden, be sure to follow the channel. Thank you for walking this journey to the end. Let me know if you'd like me to write a bonus epilogue or create a complete video story from this entire timeline. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of something tender and true.